At exactly 32 seconds in, the hearing room detonated with the kind of silence that shatters bone. The air itself ripped open as Jasmine Crockett slid a folder across the mahogany desk, the paper edges slicing like glass. The damage was not theoretical. $10 million had already vanished, siphoned like blood from the nation's veins, leaving 500 families to collapse under mortgages they could no longer pay, leaving children like 7-year-old Caleb Martinez in Dallas without the surgery his doctors had scheduled. It was the cost of one man's arrogance, and his name was Donald Trump. But the question hung, like a guillotine, above the room. What did his DNA have to do with the missing millions? The marble walls breathed. The overhead lights bled. The microphones whispered secrets as if begging Jasmine to release them. The chamber pulsed with menace, cameras clicking like teeth, and every set of eyes locked on the figure slouched in the witness chair. Donald Trump's smirk twitched, too forced, as though stitched together with thread that could not hold. The scent of sweat rolled beneath the cologne haze, thick, metallic, desperate. Jasmine did not lean forward. She did not raise her voice. Her calm was surgical, a scalpel poised above an infection. She unfolded the folder with unhurried precision, each crease opening like a wound. The papers breathed in her hands, weighted with consequence, pulsing as though veins ran through them. For a moment, the room forgot to breathe. "You know," she began, her voice sharp as glass dragged across marble. "Truth doesn't need your permission to exist." The sentence cut deeper than any shout could have. The cameras zoomed in. Screens across the country froze in that moment, capturing her eyes, steady and unflinching. Outside the chamber, people had gathered in clusters around phones and televisions. A grocery clerk in St. Louis left carts abandoned mid-aisle. A retired teacher in Birmingham, Margaret Lane, clutched her chest, whispering, "She's finally doing it." Children leaned closer to the glow of living room screens, watching democracy take form not in volume, but in evidence. Trump shifted, clearing his throat, attempting a laugh that fractured in the stale air. "It's a witch hunt," he muttered. But the words fell flat, brittle as chalk dust. The walls seemed to lean closer, pressing him into his seat. Jasmine slid one page free, its weight deliberate, the sound of paper dragging across wood, slicing into the silence. The audience, both in the room and across the country, leaned forward. Even the air carried tension like static before lightning. "This document," she said, voice calm, "carries not only the numbers of what was stolen, but the biological proof of who signed and sealed the theft." Her eyes locked on Trump's, steady, cold, inevitable. DNA does not negotiate. It does not lie. Somewhere in the chamber, a gasp cracked the silence. Phones lit up with frantic messages. Headlines began writing themselves in real time. The question was no longer whether Jasmine had evidence, but how deep this revelation cut, and how quickly Trump's defense would bleed out. The silence had not even settled when Trump's hand twitched toward the microphone, desperate to reclaim ground he had never secured. But Jasmine Crockett was faster, not in movement but in control. Her fingers rested lightly on the page, a surgeon deciding where to cut. The paper itself seemed to hum with the weight of what was written there, its edges breathing, its ink whispering. "The first 10 million, she said, her words slow and merciless, was not abstract money. It was rent for 500 families. It was medicine for 300 children. It was paychecks for 200 workers who never saw a dime." She paused, letting the silence sharpen into a blade. "When you steal from people, Mr. Trump, you don't just steal money. You steal time. You steal breath." Screens across the country erupted with reactions. A college student in Philadelphia slammed her laptop shut and shouted, "That's it! That's the line!" before texting it to her entire group chat. In Houston, a bus driver pulled over just long enough to crank the radio volume so his passengers could hear. Social media flooded with clips before Jasmine had even finished the sentence. Her words already transformed into a chant, a weapon, a prophecy. Trump scoffed, a sound that tried for confidence but landed in desperation. "You have nothing," he sneered, his voice breaking. "You people always try this. Always the same fake numbers, fake papers, fake everything." Jasmine's expression did not move. She lifted the page higher, turning it so the overhead lights carved it into sharp relief for the cameras. The paper glowed like a blade under surgical light. "This," she said evenly, "is not fake. It is a chain of custody. It is a verified sequence. And it ends with your DNA." The room gasped, as if the ceiling itself had collapsed. The phrase, DNA, exploded across screens, racing through text alerts, news tickers, and whispered conversations in living rooms. A grandmother in Cleveland leaned closer to her granddaughter and said, "Remember this moment. This is how truth survives." Trump's face flushed. He leaned forward, finger jabbing the air. "You can't prove anything. This is harassment." His voice cracked louder than he intended, the desperation bleeding through. Jasmine's reply was a whisper, but it carried farther than his shout. "Justice doesn't scream. It documents." The words sliced him clean, his body jerking as though struck. Behind her, aides slid forward a second folder, thicker, darker, the cardboard edges worn like old wounds. Jasmine's hand hovered over it, deliberate, giving the moment time to swell. The anticipation was unbearable. Even the microphones seemed to buzz with hunger for what came next. "The numbers are only the beginning," she said softly. "What I hold here is the story of real lives fractured by greed, signed in your name and sealed in your blood." The room was still reeling when Jasmine Crockett cracked open the second folder. The sound was not paper, but bone-splitting. The pages inside pulsed, as if alive, each one thick with testimony, each line bleeding names and dates. She held the top sheet for a moment, her calm composure daring Trump to blink first. "This," she said, "is the affidavit of Maria Lopez, age 39, mother of 2. Her husband died in a construction accident 2 years ago. She works double shifts, and when the promised assistance never arrived, she lost their home. The eviction notice came 3 weeks after your name was signed on the siphoned funds." Jasmine's eyes cut through the chamber. "Maria and her children now sleep in a borrowed minivan. That is the cost of your theft." Trump flinched, his lips twitching into a forced sneer. "I don't know that woman. You can make up anything. You people always bring up these sob stories." Jasmine did not respond with volume. She placed Maria's affidavit flat on the desk, the weight echoing like a hammer. "You can dismiss her, but you cannot erase her. She exists, her children exist, and every viewer in this country knows what it means to see a child shivering in a car while 10 million sits in your pocket." In living rooms across the nation, the story hit with lethal precision. In El Paso, a father of 4 slammed his beer down so hard the glass cracked, shouting, "He did this to her family too?" In Detroit, a group of factory workers gathered around a phone, muttering curses under their breath, their anger sharpened into solidarity. Jasmine lifted another page, thicker, heavier, the ink blotting like dried blood. "This," she continued, "is the testimony of Robert Hastings, age 71, a Vietnam veteran. He lost his medication when his insurance cut off funding the same month the diverted money should have covered it. He spent the last 3 weeks rationing pills until his daughter found him unconscious on the kitchen floor." Trump lurched forward, slamming his palm on the desk. The sound ricocheted across the chamber, an animal cornered. "Lies, all lies. I don't sign anything with DNA. That's ridiculous. Nobody does that." His voice cracked high, the pitch of unraveling. Jasmine's calm cut deeper than any rebuttal. She laid Robert's testimony on top of Maria's. 2 stories stacked like stones, building a monument to truth. She let the silence linger, a silence that growled with accusation. Then she spoke with surgical precision. "Your denial is louder than your proof. But volume doesn't win here. Documentation does. Cameras captured every second. The close-ups of Trump's reddened face, the tremor in his hand, the way his mouth opened without sound before snapping shut. Clips spread instantly. Jasmine's phrase already immortalized. And then she reached for the third page, her hand steady, the room's anticipation so taut it threatened to snap. Before the echoes of Trump's palm slam faded, Jasmine Crockett lifted the third page. This one was different. Its paper was thicker, almost waxy, its edges torn as if it had resisted being removed from the file. She held it up, and the camera zoomed until the text itself seemed to breathe. "This," she said evenly, "is the lab analysis. Chain of custody. Verified and signed. The DNA recovered from the envelope that carried the fraudulent authorization matches yours. 99.9% certainty. That is not political. That is biological." The words detonated in the room. A reporter dropped her pen. A cameraman whispered, "Oh my God," as his lens shook. In living rooms, in diners, in bars, people froze mid-breath. The words DNA and Trump now sat side by side on every television screen, etched in history. Trump jolted, color flooding his face. "That's impossible! That's you planted it! They planted it!" His voice cracked, breaking from anger into panic. His hand reached toward the folder as if he could snatch it away, as if tearing the page could erase reality. But Jasmine was ready. She lifted the document higher, letting the light carve across the embossed seal at the bottom. It glimmered under the surgical bulbs, a weapon made of paper. "You cannot tear this truth, Mr. Trump. You cannot shred a chain of custody. The paper outlives the lie." Gasps erupted. Phones lit up like fireflies across the chamber. Outside, crowds gathered around screens in New York, in Chicago, in Dallas, chanting her words back in unison. "The paper outlives the lie." Trump tried again, desperate. "People don't care about this. They care about jobs. They care about the border." Jasmine cut him with a whisper so sharp it silenced him mid-sentence. "They care about their children not dying in minivans, Mr. Trump. They care about their fathers not collapsing on kitchen floors. And those lives were stolen with the same hand that left this DNA." She placed the analysis flat atop the other testimonies, the stack now a tower of undeniable truth. The sound echoed like a gavel, like judgment itself. Trump's bravado cracked further. He tried to laugh, but it came out strangled, a sound closer to choking than amusement. His eyes darted to the exits, then back to the cameras, searching for an escape that did not exist. His confidence was unraveling in real time. Jasmine leaned forward slightly, her calm so absolute it felt predatory. "You once said the system couldn't touch you, but here it is, Mr. Trump. Document by document, truth by truth, and every page has your signature in blood." The chamber erupted into a frenzy. Shouts from the gallery, reporters firing questions, aides rushing to steady the chaos. Yet through it all, Jasmine sat perfectly still, her hands folded, her eyes locked on Trump. She had not raised her voice, but she had already dismantled him piece by piece. And as the din swelled, she reached for the next folder, darker still, its edges frayed like burned cloth, as though it had been rescued from fire. The folder opened like a wound, its charred edges curling as if it still remembered fire. The room seemed to dim, the light focusing only on Jasmine Crockett's hands as she drew the pages free. The paper itself was scarred, edges blackened, but the words inside gleamed with merciless clarity. "This," she began, her voice low and surgical, "is the ledger that tracks every cent of the 10 million diverted, line by line, family by family, life by life." She paused, her fingertips sliding down the column. 500 households displaced, 300 children untreated, 200 workers unpaid. Each number here is not a statistic. It is a gravestone waiting to be carved. The chamber convulsed. Trump's face drained, then flushed again, color flickering like a failing light. He leaned into the microphone, voice straining. "You're lying. Those numbers are fake. You can't tie that to me." Jasmine lifted a second sheet. This one printed with signatures. The ink bled across the paper. Thick, undeniable. "This is your authorization. Your initials, and the DNA from the envelope matches the saliva seal you left. The theft is signed in your hand and sealed in your blood." The sound that followed was not silence, but collapse. A woman in the gallery screamed. Reporters surged to their feet, shouting over one another. Phones across America buzzed with alerts. Breaking. DNA evidence links Trump to fraud. In Kansas City, a group of firefighters on break stood frozen around a television, one whispering, "This is history." In Miami, a teacher paused her class and let her students watch, telling them, "You'll tell your children you saw this moment." Trump thrashed in his chair, words tumbling into chaos. "It's a setup. The FBI, the Democrats, everyone's against me. Nobody believes this." His voice cracked into a plea, brittle and hollow. Jasmine's reply landed with devastating calm. "The only person against you is the truth. And truth does not negotiate." The phrase struck like lightning. Outside, protesters chanted it in unison. On social media, it spread with the speed of fire, printed on signs, echoed in songs, etched into memory. The words became a movement before the sentence even finished. Jasmine pressed the final sheet flat, the sound like a coffin closing. "Here are the names," she said, her voice steady. "Maria Lopez, Robert Hastings, Caleb Martinez. These are not abstract victims. They are human lives, and their stories are forever tied to your theft." Trump slumped back, his body folding inward, his breath shallow. His hands gripped the desk, as though it were the only thing tethering him to the room. The arrogance was gone, replaced by something raw. Fear. The cameras captured every second of his unraveling. Across the country, people wept, cheered, shouted into phones to call loved ones to the screen. A nation was watching a collapse in real time, and Jasmine sat unshaken, the embodiment of calm precision. And then, without a trace of triumph in her voice, she whispered, "The reckoning is not mine. It belongs to every family you betrayed." The chamber quaked with the weight of those words, and when the echoes faded, the silence was not empty. It was alive, breathing through every wall, filling every corner with a presence too heavy to ignore. Jasmine Crockett did not move, her hands resting on the tower of documents like a judge presiding over the fate of history itself. Trump's eyes darted frantically, first to the exits, then to the cameras, then down to his trembling hands. He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. For the first time, the man who built his career on noise had been stripped down to silence. The collapse was visible, not just political, but human. Jasmine leaned back slowly, her composure unshaken, her voice measured. "You do not beg this room for mercy. You beg every child who went hungry, every veteran left in pain, every mother forced into a minivan. That is where your debt lies, and it cannot be erased." Screens across the country captured that moment with surgical precision. In Phoenix, Maria Lopez watched from the borrowed van where her children slept. Tears streamed down her face, not from pity, but from vindication. In rural Ohio, Robert Hastings' daughter held his hand tighter as he lay recovering, whispering, "She spoke your name, Dad." She spoke it for everyone to hear. The reckoning spread like a storm. In city streets, protesters held vigils, their candles flickering in time with the chants, "Truth does not negotiate." Outside courthouses, crowds formed spontaneously, their voices swelling into a demand for accountability. The impact was immediate, visceral, unstoppable. Trump slumped deeper in his chair, his shoulders sagging, the fire gone from his eyes. He tried one last defense, voice barely above a whisper, "This isn't fair." Jasmine's reply landed like the final stroke of a chisel. "Fairness is what you stole. Justice is what you face. The camera zoomed in on Trump's face, capturing the collapse in real time, while Jasmine remained statuesque, her calm authority now immortalized in the collective memory of millions. Clips of her words flooded every screen, every feed, every conversation. Teachers replayed the footage in classrooms. Families called one another to watch together. Elderly neighbors gathered in community halls, their voices trembling as they repeated her lines. And when the gavel finally struck, the sound reverberated like thunder. The room exhaled. The nation exhaled. The truth had been documented, spoken, sealed. Jasmine gathered the stack of documents into her arms. They no longer seemed like paper. They were stone tablets, unshakable, eternal. She rose from her chair and turned toward the gallery, her voice carrying not to Trump but to the people. You asked if truth could stand against bluster. You have your answer. Truth doesn't scream. It doesn't beg. It endures, and it belongs to you. The chamber erupted in cheers, sobs, chants that echoed through the marble halls and spilled into the streets. Trump sat hollow, a man undone. Jasmine stood unbroken, the hero who proved that evidence cuts deeper than noise, that calm can dismantle chaos, that truth, once spoken, cannot be silenced.